Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of He's Not Wrong. I'm your host, Chad D, and we're doing things a little bit differently in this episode because usually I record the episode and then I go back and I record the intro based on how the episode went. We're not doing that today because we have too much to discuss. I'm joined here by Alabama Democratic Party Vice Chair, Tabitha Isner. Tabitha, how are you?
I'm doing great, Chad. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. We have a lot to discuss, but I do want to disclose from the start that what we're about to talk about in this episode is a very serious subject matter. And it's been a long time coming, but this is not an indictment on the Alabama Democratic Party and its candidates. This is specifically about Joe Reed, Randy Kelley, and the machine that they have built that benefits themselves and themselves only. It is remarkable, the slate of candidates that we have in Alabama this election cycle without the support of a party. And I think the fact that these candidates have been able to work together, they have been able to organize together, and they have unified with each other without money from a state party, without a Democratic Party structure that's supporting them. The fact that they were able to do this on their own really shows what they would be capable of with a structured party. And if and when they're elected to office, we have amazing candidates on the ballot. This is not about them. This is about the people who are actively working to keep them from being elected. So with that, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is hard to exaggerate how exciting this year is for Alabama Democrats. 2026 has so much potential. We have a phenomenal slate of candidates up and down the ballot. And I've had a blast talking with them and promoting them on, all my social media platforms and in person as much as I can. It's really remarkable. So we don't want that to get lost as we have conversations about what could be improved. It's just important to remember that in the same way that I love America and I can still criticize it. In fact, it's the highest form of love to want something to be better. The same is true of the Alabama Democratic Party. I criticize it because I care so much about it.
Yes.
I want it to be phenomenal. I want our candidates to have a party that's backing them up. It is not unpatriotic. It is not disloyal to want the party to be better.
Beautifully said. And you know what? This is your second time on the podcast. And the first time you were on, you were running for a state Senate seat. And some things have transpired since the last time you came on. So I just want to give you the floor to give us an update on what happened and where that went.
Yeah, so I think most folks are familiar that there was the Supreme Court decision, Kelley versus Louisiana, that allowed for states to undo their Voting Rights Act districts. And that included Alabama. So Alabama's GOP called that special session. They put in place a trigger law if Kelley was overturned, or Kelley overturned the VRA. It did. They got rid of the old VRA maps and replaced them with, or the new VRA maps, and replaced them with old maps that were unfair to Black voters. That included 4 congressional districts, and it included 2 state Senate seats. My state Senate seat was one of the ones that was changed. I had been running in what was probably the most competitive state Senate race in Alabama. And when they changed the map back to the old racially discriminatory map, it was no longer a competitive race. And I wasn't willing to run against a fellow Democrat. I'm not in this business to unseat Democrats. So I got out of the race, and I greatly appreciate all of the more than 500 people who supported my campaign financially, and all the volunteers who did such phenomenal work. And I hated to have to shut it down. But that is what the Republicans were so greedy to get a couple more seats, 1 more seat in the state Senate and 1 or 2 more seats in Congress, that they were willing to invalidate the results of the May 19th primary election and make us do it all over again.
I mean, it's
with
absolutely
different candidate districts.
Yeah, it's insane. And I the day that you made the decision or actually the day the decision came down that made you rethink things. I talked to you that evening. I know where you were in your headspace, but I think there's a value to giving people a behind the scenes look at a thought process and the emotion behind the making of a decision, how it affects the candidate, what you knew was on the line. When you found out the decision that came down and you saw the writing on the wall, how did you handle that? What did that moment look like for you?
Yeah. When they first called the special session, we knew that we were in their crosshairs. And we knew that it was possible and in fact likely that they would take the seat away. We also know that one thing Republicans love to see Democrats do is give up, assume that we're going to lose and stop fighting. And I'm not going to do that. That's not who I am. That's not who my supporters are. So we vowed that we were going to keep fighting until the decision was done. We were going to keep running as if it wasn't going to happen. And so the night that it was finally declared that the Senate seat would be changed, I was having a fundraiser for my campaign. And, I was making a speech about why victory is in our grasp and how it all can be done. And moments later, after collecting a stack of checks, we got the news that the seat was going to be lost. So it's been, I think, really hard. So many people had invested in that. And then we had to decide whether to keep going, running against a Democrat for that seat, or whether to back out. And I think that decision was painful because there were so many people who had invested in me.
Yeah.
But I also, I don't think we can afford as a Democratic Party to be, non-strategic about how we spend our time and how we spend our money. So I made the strategic decision for the benefit of the party to drop out.
While this was happening to you, what was the state party doing to fight for you and against those maps that the special session just put into place?
Well, there were quite a few state legislators in both the House and the Senate who fought valiantly during that special session, and activists who fought valiantly during that special session to point out just how wrong this is, just how historically momentous of a bad decision this was. And I'm really grateful for those people who stood and fought, and some got arrested for fighting for those voting rights. However, I didn't hear anything from Chairman Kelley or from Vice Chair Reed. No one from the state party offices, no one from the staff called me to discuss how the matter would be handled, either before the decision was made by the courts nor after.
I think it goes to show the type of person that you are in your character, that this was never about power to you. This wasn't about your own personal agenda with winning office and hopefully climbing the ladder. It's the fact that you were able to look at the situation and understand what was best for the greater good, what was best for the party. You really weighed everything to make the best possible decision. And those are the kind of people that we should want running our party. Those are the type of people we should want running for office and representing us. And it's the fact that we had you and the state party did nothing to step in or to assist or even to communicate with you a path to move forward or how to prevent this from happening again, whatever that looks like. They were just not present. And this is 2026. You first ran for office in 2018. Mm-hmm. And I think so much of what we're seeing play out right now with the state party kind of harkens back to what went on in 2018. And so I that's where I want to start this discussion with the Alabama Democratic Conference and the Alabama Democratic Party. What we saw in 2018, you ran for Congress against, at the time, Congresswoman Martha Roby. Mallory Hagan was running against Mike Rogers. Election night came, and I mean, you all just y'all brought the house down with your speeches, really exposing the lack of support that the Democratic Party was giving. And that really is where, to me, the fight started. So I just want to give you the floor to talk about that experience and what you saw in 2018 and kind of how it led us to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, this is Groundhog's Day for so many candidates, where it's the same thing year after year. To go back a little further, when I first was thinking about running in the 2018 race, it was 2017, and I went and spoke, made an appointment to speak with Chairwoman Nancy Worley. She was the chair of the Alabama Democratic Party at the time. She's also a Joe Reed loyalist. And I went to meet with her in the party offices. I waited for 45 minutes. I had an appointment, but I still had to wait for 45 minutes in the lobby before anyone would speak to me. And when I finally got to talk to her, I said, do you have a candidate in mind? What's the plan for the 2nd congressional district? What should I consider this? And she said, I have no plans. Do what you want. And that was it. That was our whole meeting about whether I should run for Congress or not. She didn't ask me about me. She didn't ask me, any questions, and she didn't offer any resources. I sat and asked a whole bunch of more questions, but I didn't get any support then either. There was just a total disinterest in candidates. And I think the same is true now. And I think that really has a lot to do with Joe Reed and his influence on the party and the ADC's priorities. So as best I can tell, the ADC is very interested in who wins races in safely Democratic seats. So in the seats that are majority Black and are therefore safely Democratic, the ADC cares deeply about making sure that it's one of their friends who gets that seat.
Yeah.
But for the seats that are competitive, the seats that are would be Republican, would be an opportunity for a gain, for taking a seat from a Republican, they're really not interested in putting candidates up for those positions. They're not interested in investing in those. They will spend a whole lot more money to win a primary than they will spend to win a general.
Can you explain the difference between the ADC, the Alabama Democratic Conference, and the Alabama Democratic Party? Because I think the juxtaposition between the two of those is really important as we move forward with the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Alabama Democratic Party is the official party organization. It is recognized in the state law as an organization that needs to exist, and it's governed by a set of rules. It has a relationship with the Democratic National Committee. And so the party is the only organization that can qualify candidates, put candidates on the ballot, certify who the winner is of a primary. And the party can, in fact, go further than that. The party could choose a candidate that wasn't in the primary to be the nominee. The party can disqualify candidates. The party can do lots of things. Where the conference is a separate organization. It sounds similar, Alabama Democratic Party versus Alabama Democratic Conference, but the conference is an independent organization. It functions as the Black Caucus of the Alabama Democratic Party, but it doesn't function that way legally. It doesn't function that way financially. It functions that way in terms of the power that it has over the Alabama Democratic Party. And the conference is controlled by Joe Reed. He's been their chairman for decades, and he rules with an iron fist. And so he has influence on the party, but he technically does not. He's technically the vice chair, one of the vice chairs of the Democratic Party, because of his role, basically because of his role at the ADC, at the conference. But typically he works real hard to make sure that the majority of people who are on the state committee choosing the party officers, he makes sure that those people are loyal to him. And he typically is choosing a chair. There's my dog. Typically is choosing a chair to serve the party and to be the party leadership. And he's influencing that person, strong-arming that person, even though he doesn't himself sit in the chair role.
And this is also a good point to point out that having a Black caucus, like it is important. Having group representation within the state party is important. And when the ADC came about, there was a need for that caucus to exist, for Black Alabamians to have a voice and to be represented within the state party. But it very much seems that as the decades have gone on, the power has very much gone to Joe Reed's head and to Randy Kelley's head, and it does not serve its original purpose, no matter how hard Joe Reed tries to make it seem like they are actually serving the people they're supposed to be representing. In so many ways, they are actually going against the people that they say they're representing, because they are not doing enough to elect Democrats to enact policy that actually will better our lives.
Yeah. The history is so important to understand. I don't think you can understand what's currently going on, the tensions within the Democratic Party today, if you're not familiar with the history and, frankly, the very racist history of the Alabama Democratic Party. The Democratic Party across the country changed its perspective, changed, its stance on civil rights over time. Stance towards Black voters and Black citizens over time. But the Alabama Democratic Party has a particularly complex relationship with race. And so I think it's really worth learning history on that, and spent a lot of time trying to help people understand why Black voters in Alabama very often have good reason to be distrustful of white Democrats, because through most of history, white Democrats have been against Black folks.
For sure.
I don't think that's true anymore, to be clear. Yeah. Not that there aren't still some untrustworthy white folks, but I think the Democratic Party now, is not that.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? You told me that you met with Nancy Worley 2017. You were talking about how you wanted to run for Congress. She has no plan. There was no support for you running for that seat. And then in October of 2018, there's a letter that's sent out to Democratic candidates statewide demanding a fair share payment of the campaign funds that you have raised to get out the vote, warning that not paying would be political folly, carrying a grave risk for campaigns. And this is just a few weeks before the election. So within a year, you go from the state party chair telling you that there's no plan, there's no money, to them then saying, the Democratic conference saying, pay us, or it's going to be a grave risk to your campaign. What, from a candidate's perspective, what is receiving a letter like that a few weeks before an election? What is that like?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people don't realize what it's like as a candidate. As a candidate, many people, many organizations see candidates as a source of funding. And they come to candidates and ask for things like, will you buy the uniforms for this Little League team? Will you donate $1,000 to restock the food pantry? Will you also, buy an ad in our booklet, buy a table at our dinner? Like, the assumption is that candidates have cash to spend. And to an extent, that is presented as, if you want the support of this community, you need to show us that you support us so that we can support you. And it's a dicey vibe from the very beginning of being a candidate. You're getting these requests for financial support, and most candidates don't have money. Now, in 2018, that year was a little unusual because several of us had money. Most candidates didn't, but I had over $500,000. So did Mallory Hagan. But we had 3 different congressional candidates who all had over $500,000. And, we had Doug Jones had just been elected to the U.S. Senate. So there was this, I think, even more sense in the air that there was money to be had from organizations asking candidates to spend on them. My experience was, I knew that I needed the support of Black Democrats. Of course, every Democrat in Alabama needs the support of Black Democrats. And I wanted to show them that I cared about them and that I supported them, and that I would fight for them. And that's difficult to prove, you know, and so all these organizations were saying, you can prove it to us by buying a table, an ad, making a donation. And you start out thinking that you understand what's going on. I certainly thought I understood, okay, I have to buy a certain amount of tables and ads. But after the tables and ads had been purchased and the endorsements had been given, I got the endorsement, for example, over a Black woman. My primary opponent was a Black woman, and I got the endorsement, and it was made pretty clear to me that I was getting the endorsement because I had money. I had spent money, I had money. They said that made me a viable candidate. But I sensed that it was also because it meant that they could ask me for more. And within days of getting the ADC's endorsement in that primary, they came back and asked me for $15,000. And the requests for money did not stop.
So that happens in 2018. 2019, the Democratic National Committee gets involved in our state party. Can you just briefly give us a synopsis of what went down in 2019? Because it was dramatic. The DNC came in, cut off money, new elections were held. The old guard was trying to hold on to power, wouldn't accept election results. Just walk us through what happened then.
Yeah, so it really, again, it goes back to history. In 1990, there was this consent decree issued that gave that Joe Reed often refers to, and it was all about how Black Democrats would have representation on the state committee. And that consent decree, if you read it in depth, which I have, does not really say, and I can share that with y'all, does not really say how Joe Reed will have, how much power Joe Reed would have. It certainly doesn't name Joe Reed by name. It talks about Black representation, but what had ended up happening was that Joe Reed could basically appoint as many Black Democrats as he wanted to the state committee. And so at the start of the meeting at which officers were going to be elected in 2018, he appointed a bunch of people, a bunch of Black members of the ADC to be on the state committee so that he would have the majority of votes for electing officers. That was the year Lillian Ledbetter was running to be a party officer.
Yeah.
Ledbetter, like famous hero of feminists, of equal pay for equal work. And she lost to Joe Reed's candidate because Joe Reed very carefully instructed his people how to vote. The DNC saw how all that went down. They intervened. And as you said, the DNC really doesn't like straight parties. It doesn't have a lot of mechanisms by which to do so because we're a pretty independent organization. So they complained. They had a full hearing to hear the complaints of the plaintiff and hear the defense of Nancy Worley and Randy Kelley and Joe Reed. And ultimately, they took Nancy Worley and Randy Kelley off of the DNC, effectively stripping them of their chairship and vice chairship, and required the party to change its bylaws so that Reed would not have quite so much control over how the state party worked. And Reed has been angry ever since. Now, I'm not sure he wasn't angry before, but he was livid about this, filled with rage about the Democratic National Committee having caused Alabama to change its bylaws. He experienced that as a reduction in Black power on the state committee. It wasn't a reduction in Black representation, but it did mean that other groups also had guaranteed representation. So just as the Black Democrats would be guaranteed representation on the party, so would Hispanic Democrats, Native American Democrats, Asian, LGBTQ, young, and those with disabilities would all get some guaranteed representation on the committee, proportionate to the Democratic electorate or to the population in Alabama. But he really experiences that as a loss of control for the Black Democrats of this state. I would say it's a loss of control for Joe. It's not a loss of control for Black Democrats. Black Democrats remained highly, Black Democrats are the majority of the state party at all levels. So it's a little disingenuous, I think, for him to say that that it hurt Black Democrats in Alabama to allow other groups to be represented. But that's been the fight ever since.
So 2019, Chris England, he's elected, so he's serving as the party chair. The next election that takes place is in 2022. You ran for party chair then. You lost. You were elected vice chair of the party. I knew there was drama. I knew there was something said by Randy Kelley. I did not know the depth of how far this went until you recently started posting about it on social media, which I think is phenomenal, what you've been posting. It's been necessary because when people don't listen, you have to use the resources and the avenues and the outlets that you have to get a story out there. And I think that's exactly what you did. So I've seen the critiques online saying, oh, you got to keep this internal, or like, why are we airing dirty laundry? It's like, because you have to. Like, no fight was ever easily won in private. That? Yes, please go ahead.
So I come from a family, to be honest, I come from a family where there was child abuse in my extended family. All along, through generations, the party line, wink, wink, pun intended, the party line was, don't talk about it. It'll make the whole family look bad.
Yes, yep.
If you care about the reputation of this family, you won't tell about the abuse that's happening within it. And so the victims were told to be quiet, and the abuser was allowed to continue his abuse without accountability. Silence, I have come to understand that silence benefits the abuser.
Yep.
And it punishes the abused. I'm not interested in doing that to anyone, and I'm not going to tolerate it for myself. I don't deserve to be treated badly, and I don't have to keep quiet about it because it might make us as a family look bad.
Yeah.
No, we have to care more about our own values do not support the kind of things that are going on. This is not what is best for the family, to allow this bad behavior to continue. So I believe in telling the truth. And I think that we can't keep asking people to be quiet about illegal activity and abusive attitudes towards the members of our coalition.
And specifically what you're speaking about with the Democratic Party, you're locked out. What they want you to stay silent about so they can continue to perpetuate this kind of action and control over their officers and members of the state party. You're elected vice chair of the Alabama Democratic Party. You're locked out of the office. Your email is revoked. You're not included in meetings. You're not given access to internal documents. You're kept out of the loop. Why? What was the point of that? Who was doing that to you? Like, how did that start?
I would say that it started immediately. That immediately I was locked out. And I would say that it has to do with the fact that I was not Joe Reed's pick for that position. So Reed had endorsed a different candidate for chair, Randy Kelley, and he had endorsed a different candidate for vice chair, Troy Bailey. I lost to Randy Kelley. I won against Troy Bailey. So the fact that I was elected instead of his preferred candidate was an unforgivable offense. And I think that's how, not just that I think, I know that is how Joe Reed works. Doing something after he told you not to is an unforgivable offense, and you'll be punished with a total blockout. You'll be locked out of everything. And the same thing happens with members of the ADC who start saying, we'd like to see things run differently in the party. If you say that, you will very quickly lose your seat within the ADC and lose your seat within the party as well.
So in 2022, you are figuring out that they're not giving you roles, they're not giving you assignments, they're not creating a clearly defined lane for you. And so you are pretty much taking the power that you do have and you're trying to organize and you're trying to find poll watchers. You're sending out information. You're finding volunteers, and you were very quickly sent letters saying that you had no authority to do that. Was that the first and only time that they told you that you didn't have any authority to act to do the things that you were doing?
No. Early on, when I was first locked out of the office, I called the chair. He told me to mind my own business. I tried to argue that being vice chair, elected as vice chair of the party, meant that it was my business. He told me that he'd been vice chair and he knew that his job, when he was vice chair, his job was to do nothing, and that now my job as vice chair was to do nothing. And we went back and forth about that for quite a while. And I said, I didn't get elected to do nothing. I'm not gonna sit by and agree to that. I'm gonna keep doing things. So if there's something that I see that needs to be done, I will keep you informed about it. I will tell you what's going on, but I don't have it in me. That's not in my soul to do nothing. So I'm gonna do stuff. And he argued with me along the way, but I tried to, and I was talking to the DNC about some of this, and folks were saying to me, you can find your own lane. There's plenty of work. Just find a lane and do what you can do for the party, but keep him informed so that he can tell you if he has a different plan. So that's where I thought I was sure he wasn't doing anything for voter protection. So I figured that could be my lane. And much to my, and he didn't say anything to me about it when I started, and I copied him on every communication about it along the way. But it was the night before election night, 2022, when he sent out a message to everybody in the party saying, don't listen to Tabitha Isner. And listen, that the day before the election, I was sending out an email to all of our candidates and all of our county chairs saying, here's what you should do on election day. So, I'd been a candidate. So I was telling candidates, here are the things you need to think about. You need a victory speech. You need a defeat speech. You need a concession speech. You need to have a statement to put out to the press. You need to have, here are the things that you need to be doing at the last minute. And also, I adore you all. You're fabulous. I love my candidates so much. So if you need to call somebody and cry before election night comes, because the stress of election day is so bad, call me. I was just trying to be supportive to candidates and telling county chairs, here are the things you can do to check in on your candidates during the day. Here are the last minute things you can do for voter protection. That's an appropriate night before the election email. And instead, what the chair of the Alabama Democratic Party had to say on the eve of an election was, don't listen to the vice chair.
And you would think that's all people would need to know. But to really drive the knife in on the retribution that you said, that Joe Reed tries to take out on individuals, that sounded that sounds in line with retribution to me. But it's May 6, 2023, and there's new bylaws passed at a very chaotic meeting. And essentially, this is so crazy to me to read that this, the Alabama Democratic Party, under the direction of Joe Reed, effectively removed Hispanic, LGBTQ plus, disabled, Native American, and Asian caucuses.
And youth.
And youth. Even better. The one block that they need. And youth. Removed those caucus. What are we doing? Why?
Yeah. And Chad, it was crazier than that, because we got elected in August. And, again, Reed had been mad since 2019 that the bylaws that the party had been forced to accept bylaws that acknowledged these other minority groups. He was mad. He thought that Black should be the only minority group acknowledged. So he was trying to undo that change that the DNC forced upon Alabama. And so our first meeting ever after they were elected, after Kelley was elected chair, was in October. And on the agenda was removing that from the bylaws. But we didn't have quorum in October, so it didn't happen. Next meeting was in January. On the agenda, removing those caucuses from the bylaws. But they realized they didn't have the votes. And so they removed the bylaws amendment from the agenda rather than vote on it and lose. Next meeting was in May. They weren't going to lose a third time. So before the meeting even happened, they removed all of those people, young people, LGBTQ, disabled, Hispanic, Native American, AAPI, removed all of them from the body, from the state committee, under some false pretenses, so that they could win the vote to remove those caucuses. So imagine, kick out all the Hispanic people and then have a vote on whether we should have Hispanic people in the party. Kick out all the young people and then have a vote on whether we should kick out young people. That's how they did it. They kicked out all those people and then had a vote on whether we should kick out those people.
May 2023. We are 14 months out from all the drama of the Joe Biden-Trump campaign. We are staring down the barrel of the possibility at that time of Donald Trump becoming president for a second time. We are one year out from Joe Biden dropping out and Kamala Harris picking up the reins. And that obviously no one could have predicted that. But the Alabama Democratic Party knowing the reality of Donald Trump sitting in that White House, and that was a real threat, and they thought it would be a good idea to get rid of these caucuses from the very people that they needed the support from.
You give credit where it's due. Reed is focused. He is focused. Once he decides, he made up his mind he was not going to allow those other groups to get representation. He was laser focused on his project. Meeting after meeting after meeting, that's what he was focused on. Nothing else. No detention to anything other than getting rid of those people who did not deserve, in his mind, did not deserve representation.
It pisses me off because you've seen it on my social media. I've talked to you about it privately. People are dying in rural communities because they do not have access to health care. If you have a heart attack in certain rural communities in Alabama, it is a death sentence. A heart attack is a condition in which we have progressed so far from decades ago, where it was a death sentence. It is now a curable thing that you can still live a full life after it happens. Now, if you have a heart attack in certain rural communities in Alabama, it is a death sentence because you do not have access to an ambulance or to a hospital that specializes in the care that you need. There's no way to get you to a hospital within the time frame that you need to get to one in order to be saved. And yet, Joe Reed, instead of supporting candidates like you or, just Democrats in general that are running on policies and platforms that are focused on expanding healthcare so rural hospitals don't close so people can continue to live, the very people that Joe Reed says he supports, he's actively hurting them. That pisses me off so bad.
Yes. And young people are leaving this state. That's one of the other crises we don't talk about. Is young people are leaving this state because they don't have opportunities here. And so we kick out the young people from Democratic Party leadership, because there aren't, there's been so much more happening. Folks trying to, for example, make a women's caucus, which wouldn't change the makeup of the party, but would allow for women to have a formal organization within which to organize. Here we are, we've become this complete anti-abortion state, and there's no interest in talking about women's reproductive health. There's no interest in talking about the criminal justice system that is, under DOJ supervision. There's no interest in talking about any policy issue except for Black representation. That is the only issue that you see Joe Reed out talking about. And while it is a very important issue, it can't be the only issue. And let me say why. We are a coalition party. The coalition works and wins when we have Black folks, LGBTQ folks, women, each of whom are motivated maybe by a different set of priorities, but you form a coherent plan. And that's what Project 2025 did for the right. It took a bunch of people with a bunch of different priorities, and it said, here's a plan to get everybody what they want, and we're all going to be all in on a plan that gets everybody where they want to be. So we don't have to agree on all the details, but if you if you're on board, we're going to get to a future state where everybody gets what they want.
Yep.
And the Democrats need to be doing the same thing. That's how coalitions work. And there just hasn't been any interest from Reed in building a coalition of any kind.
It's frustrating because I was giving a speech in Selma earlier this week. And
which I heard was very good, by the way. Someone told me about it the other day.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. One thing that I was talking about in the speech was I talked to a few Black voters before the event, and they were talking about how they're just very checked out. They've been voting for Democrats for so long. They keep electing Democrats, but nothing is changing. And so I made it a point to call out in my speech that, you know what, in these rural communities, you often do see Democrats being elected. Y'all are doing your part. You're showing up to vote. You're electing Democrats. But Democrats in Alabama don't have the power to enact the legislation that needs to be enacted to actually make your life better. But this year, we finally have the chance to give those Democrats the power that they need to make our lives better. So don't check out yet. Don't check out. Like we have a real chance here to actually give the Democrats that you've been voting for and electing for years the power that they need to better our lives. Just like, don't check out yet. And when I was saying that, what was going through my mind was how there is the leader of this Black caucus that is actively working against the very people who are voicing their concerns that they don't want to vote because they have been voting and nothing has been changing for them. And they have a leader of their caucus within the Democratic Party that is not doing a damn thing to support them. It is frustrating.
Yeah, and a lot of people are frustrated. I think, just the perception that Reed puts out there, he's painting a picture where all Black Democrats are represented by him. That is far from true. Many Black Democrats are tired of the way things have been done. That doesn't mean that we don't respect the history of the ADC, which has done so much good throughout its history, but is not currently very effective. And that is something that is not a white versus Black issue. It's not even an old versus young issue. There are people of all ages and races and geographies who see this. But there is a fear of speaking up because Reed does hold such power. A lot of people are afraid to speak about their criticism of Joe Reed and the Alabama Democratic Conference because he is so powerful and so influential. And let me give some specific examples of that. So I live in Montgomery, and in Montgomery, our mayor is Stephen Reed, the son of Joe Reed. So everything in city government is also influenced by Joe Reed. He has an insider's perspective on how the whole city is managed. So in Montgomery, to speak up against Joe is to speak up against your mayor. And in a city that has a history of political machinery, and what I mean by that, a political machine is when loyalty is rewarded with jobs and disloyalty is punished by losing jobs, losing opportunities, sometimes losing housing. So the Reed family owns an incredible amount of property in Alabama, in Montgomery area in particular. And so all of his, it's a lot of rental properties, all of his tenants know that they need to mind their P's and Q's if they want to keep their rental situation. I have heard many stories of people losing their jobs after criticizing Joe Reed because he has control over so many things, including the AEA. He's a very influential person in the AEA. He used to be the co-leader of the AEA. And so that means all the teachers that are associated with the Alabama, associated with public schools need to worry about whether they would lose their job if they speak ill of Joe Reed or in a way that's perceived as ill. And as a candidate, if knowing that Joe Reed will intentionally try to punish you at the ballot box if you're not supporting him, candidates are generally unwilling. Even future candidates, someone who's thinking about running for office eventually, will have to think twice before criticizing Joe Reed, because he does still have influence over a significant portion of voters. And very often we need every vote we can get.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to pivot real quickly to what I call the $20,000 letter, because we talked about it a little bit in 2018, and it is 8 years later in 2026, and they are still sending letters to candidates asking for money in order to buy a table to get their endorsement. People, candidates, campaigns now arguably are more cash strapped than they were in 2018. And it is a valuable endorsement. It is a political machine that you've made the case very clear for. You don't want to make mad. And they're putting candidates in a really tough spot asking for that money. I just want to take a pause right here and ask about the ADC sending out these letters to candidates in 2026, knowing how cash-strapped campaigns are, the economy that we live in. Why have they not changed the script or the method in which they're going about business? It's like, oh, it's just like copy and paste every single election cycle. Nothing has changed. Why is that?
Yeah, so this has been the business model of the ADC for a long time. And let me first describe how I think, like, the Pollyanna idealistic version of how this works. If we give the absolute benefit of the doubt, the way that I think they would describe it is that the Alabama Democratic Conference is a trusted messenger within the Black community. And so when you give money to the Alabama Democratic Conference, you are giving them the supports they need, the financial resources they need to communicate with a huge number of Black voters across your district, across the state. They print these yellow ballots. Mm-hmm. Printing costs money. We all know that. So you've got to hire a designer to make all of these ballots. You've got to print them all up and then distribute them. And they distribute them, most of us have seen them being distributed at polling locations where there might be 3 or 4 people standing outside the polling location with maybe a candidate's t-shirt on, and they're handing out these yellow ballots. So those people are paid to stand there all day long and hand out those yellow ballots. And in addition to being there on election day, they're also distributing those ballots to Black churches, to Black community centers. They're getting the word out so that people know who to vote for. So that's how I think best case scenario it works. And when I wrote the check in $5,000 check in 2018, that's what I was told was going to happen. That's not what happened, Chad. That's not what happened.
What happened?
So I paid the $5,000. They wanted 15 and I paid 5. And then a few days later, they called me and said, I think it was on a Thursday, they called and said, on Friday, you need to be here at 6 o'clock to pick up your ballots. And I was like, it's Friday. The election's Tuesday. And it's Thursday. You're telling me to come pick up ballots on Friday to distribute them. Well, I thought I was paying you to distribute them. I'm very confused. So I couldn't go. I had campaign events. It was right before the election. So my husband went, and folks were sitting around in the ADC offices in downtown Montgomery, and they were, they had a map of the city, a paper map spread out on the table, and they were pointing at areas and saying, okay, well, why don't you take this area? And that person was saying, well, I go to this church over here, so let me take that church. Okay, you take that church. And so my husband stood there sort of wide-eyed and baffled as they were divvying it up, not in an organized, pre-planned way, but on the spot saying, why don't you take this stack to that church and you take this stack to that church? And my husband didn't know what to ask for. He assumed he was getting an assignment or something. He didn't know. But they gave us, a box of, 1,000 copies of the yellow ballot for us to distribute ourselves. And all the other candidates had representatives there as well, getting their boxes. But I I had no plan to distribute those ballots. So it doesn't actually work quite the way that they say it does. And to be frank, it's not, they're spending a lot of money on ballots. And once you're spending at least $1,000 telling people who to vote for in an election, that is called electioneering. I don't mean for that to sound like a negative word. It's just a legal term in Alabama law. Once you're spending $1,000 to tell people who to vote for, you're electioneering, and you need to fill out paperwork. You have to report where you got your money and how you spent your money to the Fair Campaign Practices Act. Because of the Fair Campaign Practices Act, you have to report that to the Secretary of State's office. And the Alabama Democratic Conference does not do that. They are receiving huge amounts of money, and they are spending, I don't know how much money, but more than 1,000, and they are not reporting to the FCPA about their electioneering activities. And that's illegal. And I didn't know it at the time in 2018, but I know it now.
Oh, so they're taking money from candidates and they're spending that money, but they're not reporting it at all.
Correct.
This is a good place to take a break. We're going to take a break and then we're going to come back, and I have audio that I want to play, and then I want to discuss it with you, and it'll go into the legality of the money. So we're going to take a break and then we're going to be right back. All right, and we're back. Thank you, Tabitha, for all of that so far. This is the moment in which I have teased out to people, and I've been waiting for, because I've been sitting on this audio for years, not knowing the best way to use it, or if it is impactful or if it matters. And with everything that you have talked about and everything you've been sharing on social media, it really put emphasis on this audio that I have. It made me realize, oh, this is actually what Randy Kelley meant. So to give context, what I'm about to play for the audience is a recording from a meeting that Mallory Hagan had when she was running for Congress in 2018 with Randy Kelley and myself at the church that Randy Kelley was pastor of at that time in 2018. And he is pretty much shaking her down for $20,000, telling her that it's in her best interest to buy a table. So I'm going to play the first clip of the audio right here.
ADC endorsing folks in the primary. I've taken endorsement for some folks on the floor. There's one specific candidate. He did some things I really didn't like. So what I got before the in the delegate assembly and just said, no, we're not going to endorse him. And the great majority of folks is going to go with me. I don't care which way I go. Might have one or two people that go against me. But now, I try to work with you. So you need to buy a table.
Okay. I'll think about it.
Okay. Hope you think hard about it.
So I just want to reiterate what he said. He said endorsing folks in the primary is what the ADC does. And he has taken the endorsement from some folks on the floor. There's one specific candidate. He did some things I didn't like. So I went before the delegate assembly and I said, we're not going to endorse him. And the great majority of folks are going to go with me. They don't care which way I go. There might be one or two people who go against me, but I tried to work with you, so you need to buy a table. That is so telling to me about the way Randy Kelley operates. And I know we've been talking about Joe Reed, but it's Joe Reed and Randy Kelley. They're a package duo. They're a package deal. They're one and the same. They're cut from the same cloth. And Randy Kelley is telling Mallory that the Black Caucus, the majority of members in the party, they're not thinking for themselves. They're just waiting for me to tell them what to do, that they're going to go along with what I say. So you need to give me money, not because you're the best candidate, not because your platform is actually and policies are actually going to help people. But what this is about is the fact that you have a couple $1,000s in your bank account and I want them. And if you don't give them to me, you're not going to get that endorsement. So it's in your best interest to give me that money and buy a table. And he goes on, it's a long audio. I have it posted on He's Not Wrong podcast.com. So if you want to listen to the audio in full, I have it unedited on my website. So go listen to it. But I want your take on that.
Yeah, I think that's right. That is my experience, and the experience of many candidates that I've talked to, is that it is not about your policy positions. There is a process by which they vet candidates. They interview you. So they bring in the candidates for a position and they interview you and ask you some questions. It's clear in the interview process that your policy positions have nothing to do with whether you are going to get that endorsement. The endorsement is entirely based on who you have kept happy, who you have pissed off, and how much you have spent on them. It's very clear. And there are candidates who got the endorsement who are angry, and there are candidates who didn't get the endorsement who are angry. But the one thing they all agree on is that it's made very clear that the way to get the endorsement is to spend money. And you can be denied the endorsement. Even after getting the endorsement, there's a threat that the endorsement will be undone, and it has been undone. Even after being issued publicly, the endorsement has been undone when a candidate didn't pay up or didn't pay up adequately.
Looking at the letter, it says we're asking you to submit your, in all bolded letters, fair share not later than May 4th, 2026. The primary was on May 19th. So they're at a time where you're wanting to use whatever money that you have responsibly. Final get out the vote ads on Facebook targeted to your small community, depending on what office you're running for. You're needing to buy yard signs to put up at the polling precincts. It is just a vital time to have money in your bank account. And 2 weeks out from the election, they're saying you have to pay your fair share not later than May 4th, 2026, when the primary is May 19th. $20,000. That is.
And keeping in mind that most candidates see it coming from a ways off, that you're expected to buy this ticket, you're expected to buy this table, you're expected to buy an ad. And so they're doing those things thinking, politics is expensive. This feels a little pay to play.
Yeah.
And they get the endorsement and they're excited. They have the support of the Black Caucus, which is great. They feel thrilled. And then they get this letter. All that money you spent on tables and ads and tickets, it's not enough.
Wow.
Additional money is now required. And these candidates didn't see it coming, because if they're smart, if they've done what we've told them to do, they have a plan already in place for how all their dollars are going to be spent.
Yep.
Get out the vote in the last week or two before the election. And now this unexpected expense. It wasn't enough to get the endorsement. Now there's a new expense. And 95% of our candidates that are running in any given year are first-time candidates.
Yeah.
There's no orientation manual. There's no orientation training for candidates where they say you'll need to buy the tickets and the tables and the ads, and then after you get the endorsement, you'll need to pay it again. There's no orientation that tells you that. So candidates don't see it coming. They think they've already paid the price to get that endorsement. And this is an extra on top of everything they've already spent to get that endorsement.
I hope those listening to this episode do go to my website and listen to that audio in full, because what they'll hear is Mallory at the time was a first-time candidate saying, you're asking me for this money. You're asking me for $20,000. I have staff to pay. I have ads to buy. I have expenses as a candidate, and I have the money. It's all the money that I have. And so all I'm asking you is to show me dollar for dollar where my money's going, because I want to know that it's being spent in the ways that you are telling me it's going to be spent. She's laying out very responsibly that people are entrusting me with their money, and I am now asking you to do the same and show me where my money is going. I'm not telling you I'm not going to give you the money. I'm just asking you to show me how you're spending it. And he could not give her an answer. He ended up diverting the conversation, saying, well, you came in here all defensive. Exact quote, you came in here all defensive, trying to make it seem like she's some kind of crazy person for wanting receipts.
Yep. Yeah. So I think now's a great time, to share my similar experience.
Please.
I was asked in 2018 for 15,000, and I said to Joe, it was Joe Reed who called me as opposed to Mallory was meeting with Randy Kelley. Joe Reed called me and asked me for this money, and I said, my understanding of federal election law is that I can give a PAC $5,000. If this is a donation to a PAC, I can't give more than $5,000. And I said, I don't know, is Alabama Democratic Conference a PAC? And he said, no, I don't want you to write it to the Alabama Democratic Conference. I want you to write it to Big PAC, Blacks in Government PAC, and also to Fund to Advance Democracy, I think was the second, and there was a third one. So I said, well, let me look into it and get back to you. I'll talk to my compliance person, my lawyer. So we found a FEC record for Blacks in Government PAC. And I was like, okay, I know I can legally write a check to Blacks in Government PAC. But we couldn't find a record of those two other PACs that he suggested even existing. So my lawyer recommended that I not write checks to PACs that didn't exist. So I didn't. So I told him, I can give you $5,000 to the Blacks in Government PAC. I can't write any more than that as a donation to a PAC. However, I'm trying to be reasonable. So I said, if you can give me an invoice for GOTV, because he was saying all the things about, we get out the vote for you, we get out the vote for you. I said, okay, if you get out the vote for me, can you give me an invoice, a detailed invoice that says what you're going to do for me? And I can pay you as a vendor. I pay a vendor 15 grand, no problem, to do GOTV for me. So just give me an invoice that I can pay. And then we don't have to worry about PACs at all. And he screamed and yelled at me. That was not how this was supposed to be done. And threatened me.
Did you ever did you ever receive any kind of receipt or invoice or any kind of documentation showing you where your money went or that your money was received? Have you received anything of that nature?
He explicitly rejected the idea of an invoice for services rendered. And in fact, I wrote that $5,000 check to the Blacks in Government PAC, delivered it right away, and it was cashed right away. But it wasn't ever reported as having been received by the Blacks in Government PAC. So
the money was taken out of your bank account, confirmation. It was withdrawn.
Yep.
You checked the FEC website to see if they reported on it, and they never did.
Never did. Never reported having received $5,000 from me at no point in time. Years have gone by, and the FEC has issued complaints against Blacks in Government PAC repeatedly because it has not produced receipts. It has not produced correct documentation. The Blacks, and you can look all this up yourself on the FEC website. It shows the Blacks in Government PAC receipts and expenditures, and it shows that the money that came in to Blacks in Government PAC came from Blacks in Government PAC, which doesn't make any sense. But it says that the donor is Blacks in Government and the receiver is Blacks in Government, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2018 that is coming from an unknown source, being spent on unknown things. They say that they spent over $1 million printing ballots that year, but there's no record. And the FEC wrote them a letter and said, you're out of compliance. These numbers don't add up. This is not acceptable. And year after year after year, you can see every quarter they submit their reports or they don't. And every quarter the FEC says you're out of compliance. But the FEC did not shut them down, even though none of these records add up. None of these records meet the legal standard. I think that is a huge, huge problem. It's not a small administrative error. Lots of people get one letter from the FEC saying, hey, you misreported this little thing. Can you fix this little error? That's pretty normal. But every single report that they submit is flagged by the FEC for being incorrect. And you can go look at them yourself and you'll see the math doesn't math. There's no transparency. They're not showing who gave them money or how they spent.
Towards the end of the audio that is on the website, he'snotwrongpodcast.com, Randy told Mallory specifically that the Alabama Democratic Conference is a nonprofit organization. Why would he say that? What is the difference between a PAC and the responsibilities that a PAC has? And if they are a nonprofit, the responsibilities that they have? Because if they were a nonprofit, they wouldn't be able to endorse political candidates, right?
Yeah.
So either way, they're
typically, right. Typically, we mean a 501c3, and 501c3s are not allowed to engage in electioneering at all. They can't endorse candidates. So the ADC can't be a 501c3, and it's not a 501c3. It's not registered with the IRS as such. In fact, the ADC, the Alabama Democratic Conference, is not registered with anyone that I am aware of. So on the Secretary of State's website, every incorporated body, every business entity, as they call it on the Secretary of State's website, has to register with the state. I run a nonprofit, a C3. I also run a C4, both of which are registered with the state of Alabama. Every business needs to be registered with the state of Alabama, nonprofit, for-profit, whoever.
Yep.
There are multiple organizations that are registered to Joe Reed. The ADC is not one of them. The Alabama Democratic Conference does not exist on paper. It doesn't pay taxes. It doesn't have an excuse to not pay taxes. It employs people, but it's not clear that those people are receiving 1099s. It's not clear how any of this is done legally. And that is a huge risk for the Alabama Democratic Party to be associated with, virtually indistinguishable from an organization that doesn't pay taxes, isn't registered with the state Secretary of State, doesn't have C3 status or C4 status, doesn't file any paperwork with the Secretary of State about their electioneering expenditure. Like, it's violating all the rules. And for the Alabama Democratic Party to be virtually indistinguishable from an organization operating completely outside the law is a risk to the party.
Wow.
An intolerable risk.
I'm the host of a podcast and I'm speechless. And I don't think that's a good thing.
Bad. We are in a bad spot.
Well, okay. We're in a bad spot, but I have hope because the party's meeting on August 8th. There's an 8-hour-long meeting, and that is about a little over a week from now. So the party's meeting on August 8th to elect new membership, to elect seats that have not been filled for party members. What we do know is that old guard is going to come in there hot and strong, and they are going to try to hang on to whatever little bit of, microphone. They're going to try to hold on to whatever little perceived power that they have. They're going to come in guns a-blazing. But we also have, as what I know right now, we have two people who are running for that party chair seat. We have Robert Hunter, and we also have Bobby Singleton now, who's in the mix. Both great individuals. I know both of them. But what that tells me is, like, the people at that meeting will have a chance to choose which direction they want the party to go, and they have options, which this year is huge. It's huge for them to have the options to pick on what direction and what path they want to go down. Yeah. From what we know, the meeting's happening. What do people need to know going into it? What do you want people to know beforehand? What are some action items that we can all take part in before and on August 8th?
Yes. So I think it's important for people to be there on August 8th, or at least to watch online streaming. We're working on getting a live feed for that. It's important that you see how things happen, because all of this sounds crazy. Yep. When you first hear it, you think that Tabitha, she must be exaggerating. That Mallory, she must have misunderstood. That whatever. We want to believe the best about one another. I love that about us. I love the Democrats want to believe the best about one another. But it's worse than you think. So go to one of these meetings and see just how bad it is. The meeting won't be well organized. I wish it would. The DNC has given Alabama very specific instructions for this meeting because Alabama has been out of compliance with DNC bylaws for so long. basically since Chair Kelley's election, debatably long before that.
Yep.
We've been out of compliance, and the DNC is monitoring this election closely, and they've given a whole list of instructions. And already the party has failed to comply with the DNC requirements already. For example, there's supposed to be an election judge making sure the election is fair. No judge has been assigned. That judge was supposed to be announced 30 days before the election. We're now at 10 days out, no word. There's supposed to be, a listing of the state Democratic Executive Committee members is supposed to be available to people. That's not been done. There's supposed to be a qualifying process for people who are running to fill vacancies or to serve on the DNC. That process does not exist. There's just so many things that aren't going to be run effectively. And I think it helps for people to see that. And then if you're a member of the committee, it's so important that you come having read the bylaws and knowing what the rules are, because someone will be trying to break the rules throughout the meeting. And that's every meeting I've ever been to, rules are broken. Robert's rules are not followed, the bylaws are not followed. And seeing that happen, you'll only see it if you know what the rules are.
Yep.
So knowing the rules ahead of time is important. And knowing the rules well enough that you can confidently say, I don't think things are supposed to be going this way right now, that you can raise your hand and object to something. That only happens when you feel the confidence of having been there a while. And unfortunately, we elect a whole new state committee and then immediately elect officers, which means that most people on the state committee don't have a clue. They're just getting their feet wet. And they immediately have to make a very important decision. And they don't know how to object. They don't know how to make a motion. They don't know how to do all the things that Robert's rules require. So getting familiar with that stuff ahead of time is essential. And then I think just, be in touch with your SDEC representative, the person who represents you on that state committee. Make sure they know that you want to see change. Make sure they know that you're concerned about the financial malfeasance of the Alabama Democratic Conference, that you're concerned about inclusion, that everybody should have a seat at the table. Just reiterating your values to people so that people know they're not alone. They're not going out on a limb here. They're representing their community when they ask for change.
And it's also important to plug your website right here at TabithaIsner.com.
TabithaIsner.com. Mm-hmm.
You have all SDEC members listed on there along with their email addresses. So I'm asking, if you've made it this far in the episode, email them this episode. Email those members your thoughts on Randy Kelley and Joe Reed after hearing all of this. The state party is supposed to provide those members and their contact information and make it public, which they have not. So you have stepped in, Tabitha, and taken that information and put it on your website, and kudos to you for doing that, because it is vital that people have a way to access their representatives. They're elected. We have to have a way.
Right. They were on the ballot. They're all listed on the Secretary of State's website, but you have to dig through spreadsheets.
Yeah, it's a hard website to, yeah.
Nobody wants to dig through a spreadsheet, but I do. That's who I am. I will dig through the spreadsheet. And I will hunt down email addresses. So I don't have an email address for everybody, but for as many as I could find an email address, I've got one. And I want us to have a real democracy where the people are represented by someone who feels accountable to the people and, votes with the people back home in mind. We can make that happen, but Joe Reed does not want a transparent and accountable committee. He wants people to be accountable to him and only him. He wants people to fear him, and he wants decisions to be made in order to keep him happy.
Yep.
And we will never grow as a party as long as we continue to put Joe Reed's ego ahead of growing this party and winning.
Tabitha, we've made it to the final question. What are you not wrong about?
I am not wrong that Joe L. Reed will be the downfall of the Alabama Democratic Party if we don't do something about it.
You're not wrong about that. There's so much at stake with the meeting on August 8th as we head into the midterms in November and the presidential cycle in 2028. It is so important that we get this right this year, that we have a structured Democratic Party, that candidates running now and again in 2 years have the support and the infrastructure that they need to be successful, that we have leadership that we can look to and know that they're honest and true and faithful to the Democratic cause. And that being a reality for us is in part of because of the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for all that you're doing and for coming on and sharing your story with us and speaking truth to power and holding these individuals accountable in the way that you are. I am so appreciative, and I know so many more people are appreciative for your efforts as well. Thank you, Tabitha.
Thank you.